Great. Let's do a roll call vote. Lee Smith,
What are we voting on?
just roll call.
Present.
Mark Howell
I'm here.
and Elizabeth Akers-Moore is here. All right, great. Let's get started. I did have a chance to look at the minutes. I don't know if you guys did. I know they were sent out this morning.
Wondering why I didn't see them.
They're not very involved, but if you want to know that, we can do it next time if you want.
I want to give them a
I
quick glance.
don't know if I got them. Yeah.
I sent it
Elizabeth-
this morning. I can resend it.
Elizabeth, that was my fault, so I'm sorry for the delay. I was trying to slow up Shannon's lightning work.
Sounds like something you do, Chris. Geez.
Sorry.
Yeah, I saw them come in, but
Let's just, you want us to do it next time?
I didn't get it. Can someone
All right,
resend it to me, please?
Let's do it our next meeting.
Now.
Okay, so Shannon's sending those. Government affairs update. Chris, do you want to start and then we'll go to Megan?
If you don't mind, I'd actually would love to defer to the acting town manager. So I don't, unless Megan, you want me to.
That's fine, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan and I spoke yesterday and we have some questions about how to proceed with funding that we're having difficulty with the state. Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Yeah, I think I'm here today to provide an update to this subcommittee and kind of benefit from your perspective and feedback and kind of loop this group into the conversation and where we are. So I appreciate your time. I guess to kind of take a couple steps back to give you an update on where we are with the legislative earmarks. As you all know, we received word that Concord was going to get 2 earmarks for this MCI work. One was for $475,000, I think, and the second was for $250,000. And so we got the word that we were going to get this, a while back, but we were really waiting on contracting with anyone until we had contracting with any vendors until we had a contract with the state in place and really money in our account to make sure we can pay these vendors. So when we were working with there's a couple different parties here. There's the Office of Economic Development, and then there's the Administration and Finance Office, and then us. So the earmarks flow through the Office of Economic Development in consultation with ANF, I believe. And when we have moved forward and, kind of getting the contract with the state on the first earmark, they recommended we started with the larger earmark. So we have a contract in place with them. The way this one is working is they have given us 50% of that 475, which we have in an account in the town to be able to use on MCI projects. And the second half of that will be funded on a reimbursement basis. So as you know, we've contracted with agency. That is kind of the bulk of this earmark is setting aside money for this planning and visioning process. And we're going to start getting those invoices. They're going to be paid on a basis of deliverables. So on a monthly basis. So we're going to start paying those bills. But the other earmark was primarily focused on wastewater. And it just kind of worked out. As you know, we had the budget approved at the MCI advisory board and then discussed at the select board meeting, I think in December, that, a certain chunk of it was for planning. And then really the rest of it was going to be looked at for wastewater analysis. And
is that internal from the town or directed from the state?
Is what internal? I'm sorry.
That differentiation between wastewater and planning.
So we came up with a budget on the town side of things. This is how much we want to spend on and the consulting work for planning, and this is how much we want to spend for wastewater. That was town is like you all select board and town staff working together to come up with that breakdown. But I think then we also had to come up with a budget for each earmark I think maybe
Yeah.
that's what you're asking. So for the first earmark, we were using that one for most of it was for the consultant, which is now agency. At the time it was, you know, we didn't know yet. And about 35,000 was going to be used for wastewater. And then for the second earmark, we have a budget submitted to the state saying this is really for wastewater, the rest of the 250.
Okay.
So those are the two paths. And so then we kind of got the paperwork for the second earmark and tried to contract with the state on the second earmark. We submitted our budget summary of how we're going to use it. It says more than just wastewater, right? It breaks down the specific actions that we're planning to do or are doing, really, because the time is so short. And now the update here is that we're hearing from the Office of Economic Development that they've been talking to ANF, and ANF is saying we can only access the second earmark once the first earmark is spent.
All by June
And-
30th.
What's that?
All by June 30th.
Yeah, and so like I can't pay the agency contract all right now. Like that's not responsible. You know, we have to pay when the deliverables are done, right? Like we have it budgeted, we have them contracted and procured, but I can't just blow through that. So I updated Elizabeth on this yesterday, and we were talking about, you know, one option. I guess there's a few different thoughts here. You know, this administrative path of working this through has included a lot of back and forth with our office and the Office of Economic Development, and we're explaining this, we're showing them the contracts. You know, we've procured Weston and Sampson, we've procured agency. We have a short window. Once we found out we got this money, we were working to get these vendors online so we can do this work. It's not like it's buying something. I mean, it's services. It takes some time.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been successful, right? Like the latest email from them was scary to me in that this is from Economic Development, and they're describing their conversation with ANF, saying that their position, ANF there, remains that they will consider unlocking the second earmark only after you have spent the first earmark, and outlines an additional scope of work for the second that is distinct from the work being performed for the first, which we have, like we've already said. But I'm nervous because it sounds like they might not unlock that second earmark, right? And like we have work to do and have been told we have money to do it, and have been kind of moving mountains to get it lined up to do. So, you know, when Elizabeth and I spoke yesterday, I haven't done this yet because I wanted to talk about it, but I've been thinking about how to word this and what the approach is, right? To reach out to the Office of Economic Development and say, could we change that first budget? I know I said we were going to do X amount for consulting and X amount for wastewater, but could I change it to maybe do a little more half and half? And I think that's an approach. But as I was drafting this up, I do have a worry like about this, the way they're phrasing this, and Elizabeth didn't have the email in front of her, about how they're saying like, we'll consider unlocking the second one, because I don't want to be on the hook for contracts with vendors that we have procured saying we have the money, and then there's
And
some
have the
technicality and that second one doesn't get unlocked. So I guess what I'm doing here today is kind of just explaining where we are with you all. And you know, Chris has been heavily involved in this.
Does
It's
Simon know
really
about
just
it?
the last few weeks, and so this is where we are.
Yeah, this is what we talked about yesterday, was talking to Simon. We haven't talked to Simon yet, Megan, right?
I haven't talked to him yet. There is a conversation scheduled with Simon and the town manager in a couple weeks to talk about FY26 budget priorities. And as I said to Elizabeth, I didn't not go to Simon on purpose. I just thought I'd start here, and I imagined he would be involved in the conversation at some point, but I wanted to start.
Yeah, so I guess it's a question
locally.
for us. I think it is worrying. I think I'm worried about putting something in an email, to be honest, Megan. I wonder if it's a conversation as
Yeah.
opposed to an email, but
Yeah.
happy to have both of your thoughts. My instinct is to go directly to Simon.
I actually think all three legislators, I'm assuming there's something different about the two earmarks in terms of the legislative path that they took, and one of them might be Senator Barrett's rather than Simon's
That's a
or
good point.
Carmen's. And so I think we should let them know. I think that, you know, my version of the wording would be something like, you mean you're telling me that the legislature passed legislation authorizing spending, and you're now making that spending contingent on something that wasn't in the legislation? We don't understand that. I do think there's something.
And you have 30 days to do it.
Yeah, you know, because we're trying to, you know, this sort of catch-22, it's March 12th and you have, you know, 100 days to spend this money, and we're not going to let you know whether you even have it, is kind of nutty. So
Or
I
it's
think,
intentional.
Right.
yeah, you know, I would word this pretty strongly, because we, you know, we made good faith efforts to contract with suppliers to do this work, and now you're telling us it's a maybe. And I don't think our legislatures intended it to be a maybe.
So one thing Chris suggested this when we were talking about this morning, which I think could be a good idea, is we like to elevate this now.
Mm-hmm.
I think we probably shouldn't have economic development kind of speaking on our behalf with ANF, and maybe the next level is a meeting with someone from ANF, economic development, and you know, maybe one of you or someone to have, and maybe and like tell Simon if we're thinking about this, and maybe get his read on it. He's more in the loop on navigating that. I don't know if it'd be better if he'd be comfortable joining, or if he had a different approach. I mean, I defer to his
Yeah.
thought process, but like we need to have like a level up meeting with
Right.
both agencies and say like, what's going on here? Like, are you
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. I still think we start with Simon, we bring
Okay.
in I think you're right, Mark. It could be that it was under one of those other guys. I just don't know, but start
Right.
with Simon, then move to the other two, if that's appropriate. And then,
Yeah, I may be wrong about this recollection, but I thought that the reason that we sort of ended up with two earmarks was slight differences in the language between the Senate version and the House version. And
yeah,
so I'm wondering, you know, if this is the Senate side that's hung up, then maybe Mike is the right place to go to say, you know, how come you're funding one and not the other?
yeah, I think you could totally be right about that. Megan, do you want to start? I'm happy to be on a call with you and Simon if you want to
sure?
that up. And we'll start there and then bring that up and be like, should we talk to Senator Barrett?
Yeah, just explain it like we just did here to like loop
Totally.
him.
I don't want to step on his toes if there's something that he knows that we don't know. So
Totally. That's that's wise. Okay. So we'll reach out to him and get your availability, Elizabeth, and see if we can schedule some time to brief him on our perspective of, you know, what's going
I'm
on.
hoping he'll be outraged by it, but we'll see. And maybe he already knows, you know,
Do
maybe
we-
he's like,
Yeah, also going back to the wastewater effort, do we have some expenses that were already, you know, being billed for, or invoices or something that goes along with that we're trying to pay off? And so, you know, coming in with Exhibit A, this is the invoice from our contractor, and we need to know, we need to pay it now. And so we're either going to bill it to our existing contract, because that's the only thing we have, or you're going to open up the new contract.
Right.
Megan and I were talking about that yesterday. I don't know, but you make a good, if we're really kind of boxed in by the agency contract and they think that's what the first one is going to, I agree with you, Mark. They should be like, listen, the money's fungible, like you've spent it already. We need the money now. I don't know if that'll trigger them to say, well, that's not what we agreed to. And you guys are going, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, and the way I would probably frame that question is, here's my invoice for wastewater treatment planning and, you know, work that's already been completed. How am I supposed to pay this?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's open-ended. That's just, you know, what would you do in my situation?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Did we
Well, I'll be
commit
armed
more-
with the understanding of how much wastewater. I don't have that information right now. I
Right.
know work is ongoing. But we didn't have this lined up to pay from this like line item yet because this second earmark hasn't been executed.
Right.
Right.
So I haven't been tracking those expenses, but they are happening. You know, we
Yeah.
have.
But did we
Yeah.
commit more than the first earmark contract is worth?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Did we commit more contractual expense than the first earmark permits?
Between both things, I mean, the first one is agency and the second one is with Weston and Sampson.
I think the $475,000 earmark, we've contracted 400,000 of that with agency, and there's
Yep.
a little bit left over. And then the second earmark at 250,000 hasn't been obligated.
Well, we're doing wastewater work for this project, so.
Yeah, there's work that we
Well,
could say we have bills for to Mark's
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
But does that exceed the amount of the current contract? Work
Yeah.
that's been completed?
Oh, completed? I don't know how much has been completed. I don't know how much wastewater.
When it is completed, so the total contract values.
Yeah,
should-
we were planning to spend the full double earmark, and that includes contracts with agency and wastewater and Weston and Sampson. Because that is the information we received that we were, you know, had this money to do this due diligence. And so
And I would also argue we could probably come up with some more money that is reasonably allocated to this, staff time, things like that, which we haven't even gone into, right? Things that have already been paid for, so.
no, we haven't included any of that. This
Right.
is strictly external, you know, professional consultants to do this. I mean,
Yeah.
we're working on it, but we're not getting kickbacks on that at all. No.
Yeah,
I'd use caution, you know, for any future notices to proceed or potentially stop work orders, you know, if we're gonna, until this is resolved.
Yeah.
well, you mean you would issue stop, I mean, agency is fine, we'll get that work, that's kind of, we've already planned that, but you mean anything that we've contracted for that 250? Is what you're saying, Lee, that you would say?
No, I'm saying, you know, to the extent we're about to exceed what's under the current state contract for funding,
Mhm.
I wouldn't authorize work beyond that monetary figure.
But what is that figure? Because now they're saying it's 475, right? And we had already assumed that we had the 250.
Well, I'm sorry, the current contract with A&F, what is the value of that?
475.
Okay, so I'm just suggesting don't authorize work beyond 475 until this is straightened out.
Right.
And I think
I mean,
we
and
have
it's hard.
that. Right?
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's just the sequencing, like if we were gonna start procuring procuring vendors for when we had that second earmark signed, we wouldn't be doing it would never get done because
Yeah.
now they're saying that we have to spend the first one first. It's almost like they weren't expecting us to get to that second one, you know?
Yeah.
And
No,
we have plenty of work. That's
yep.
Well, I guess that leads to, so I mean, let's talk to Simon as soon as we can.
okay.
Yep.
And then it leads us to our next question of where do we come up with extra funds if we don't get this money? And then going forward, because it doesn't sound like they're particularly going to be receptive to giving us more money next year. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Elizabeth, can I add just two more things?
Yeah, of course.
So one thing is that the expected response from the state is we're looking at headwinds for revenue in fiscal 26. And our response to that is, you know, it was $29 million that was authorized for all earmarks for this fiscal year. And the benefit to the town of Concord for $250,000 is much greater than the loss of that revenue to the state in this current fiscal year. So that the benefit is much greater to the town than the loss is to the state. And the second part to that is that the wastewater development is critical to the development of this parcel. And
Not to mention the ongoing requirements of the remaining prison land.
Right. I would go all the way as far as we're doing the necessary wastewater planning to ensure that they can continue to
Yeah.
receive service from their plant.
Right.
You know, so if they want to take over that work, then that's an option. But I mean,
Yeah, I think you're exactly. I
for the
think,
foreseeable future, the state of Massachusetts is the only client on that wastewater treatment facility, and we're agreeing to help them with it.
Right. Well, maybe we should threaten to issue a stop work order for that consultant until it's straightened out.
Right.
Mhm. I think those are excellent points. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the town of Concord gets no benefit from operating that wastewater treatment facility until it's interconnected.
yeah, you're absolutely right. They need us for that.
The other
Yep.
thing that we're seeing right now is that the state is identified $16 billion in funding it receives from the federal government as part of their $62 billion proposed budget for fiscal 26. And no one at the state has any idea how secure that funding is. So these revenue discussions by the state are just completely speculative at this point. They don't know. They don't
Right.
know. And so they really can't make that as the basis of an argument for reduced spending.
No,
Well,
they're in a
however-
terrible position, but
However, we're talking about FY 25 funds,
Right.
you know, which that ship has sailed in terms of what the federal government decides to do going forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I think Lee and Mark make great points that we have to be very, because you're right. We have to say, well, fine, you can't assure us that money, then we can't do the work. I mean, it is what it is. We have to look at our own budget, and it is kind of what it is. So, all right, we'll start with Simon. But it puts us in a position where next year, I don't know what we're gonna do, because I think there is a good argument for next year that there's not gonna be any discretionary money. And whether or not we consider this discretionary, like,
Mhm.
I think
What's
it's.
anticipated for the town meeting warrant for an ask for funds for this?
So we heard back from Peter, right, Shannon, and that for the subcommittees, that they're looking for 100,000 to continue their zoning work next year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how he got that. That was the,
I think Lee was referring to a warrant article for this year's town meeting that Mark
oh,
last time. Lee, I'm just trying to pull up
the thing that you had talked about, Mark.
the
Yes.
warrant.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
So
And you
the
had said
agency,
250?
the agency contract was, had phases 1 through 4 funded for $399, I think it was. So 400 essentially, which was the June 30th work, and then another 99 for the zoning work, which would take place
Right.
after June 30th. So right there's 100,000 in FY 26 that needs to be covered somehow.
Well, we
Yeah.
had some ARPA funds set aside, I think in the amount of 100,000 for zoning for MCI.
Yeah.
The warrant article does not have a number in it right now.
Oh, that's okay, but I'm just
That's right.
internally,
Yeah, but
Mark, you
there
tried
is
to
gonna
say
be an
250.
article, and I think the town manager plans to try to have a number in the motion.
Yeah.
Which will be, coming up in a few weeks. So, but there's a general MCI Concord planning article that just has a sum.
yeah, that's fine. I mean, that can wait literally till the floor of the town meeting. But,
Yep.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and I think probably one of the things that we were waiting for is some information on the certification of free cash. I'm not sure whether we've got that out, but that may be coming up as early as the next finance committee meeting. But the idea would be to appropriate it from free cash, so it's not in the budget. It's a one-time planning expense, which makes a lot of sense. And I think that realistically, our recommendation as the MCI advisory board should be to the community. This is really important. It's a very rare opportunity, and we need to be prepared to potentially go it alone on funding this kind of design and planning for this important effort, because if we leave ourselves with no money, then essentially we have no resources to drive this process. And I think it's, especially given all the uncertainty,
Yeah.
makes more
I
sense.
agree with that, but I think I would limit it to the planning and zoning and exclude the wastewater for now, unless
Yeah.
something changes. Not that that's not important, but like we said a minute ago, it's currently a state problem.
Well, yeah, and if we stay under the, discretion of the town manager, basically we leave the decision making about exactly what the money is spent on to our own internal, decision makers. And instead of right now, the whole reason that we're in this kind of mess is because we're trying to use somebody else's money and they have strings attached to it. Apparently very strong strings.
Yeah. Mark, am I correct that you would kind of propose 250,000 is what you
Yeah,
thought?
I had thrown that number out there just because it seemed like something that would get a significant bit of work done. And what I was thinking is that's a backstop behind the ARPA money
Yeah,
for whatever activities we think are, because we have, historical preservation, more facilities studies. Like, for example, if we decided that we were serious about trying to reuse one or more of these buildings, we need to do some kind of assessment of those, and it's probably not as complicated or as expensive as a wastewater treatment facility, but still it's not a zero number.
do we have to do anything about the ARPA monies already set aside, or do we need to do
Right.
anything about that?
ARPA's committed, although, I think some of Chris, you may want to weigh in on this too. There's some, well, I saw some question. I think this came from Parashar actually yesterday, which is that, there's activity in Washington, D.C., which is trying to claw back ARPA money that hasn't been spent, as opposed to just committed. So we
Spend
need
it
to worry
now.
about that.
What?
Well, this is,
I
The
did see
one-
that.
yeah,
So I did see that, and
Can we use that for the 100,000 remaining on the agency
that's what I'm
contract?
wondering.
That was the plan,
Get it out the door.
because that ARPA money can be spent in FY26 before whatever it is, the
But then we
December
still,
of 26, right?
December.
So-
but our issue
2024.
right now is we still have to pay, we have to use the rest of the 475 before we can touch the 250. If we don't get the 250, we can use the 100 towards it. But we shouldn't be, we should be trying to pay down that 475 using all that
Right.
money possible.
Yeah, and nobody's expecting this to happen, and of course we all hope it doesn't, but if for some reason we somehow turn out to be unable to accomplish the work by June 30th, we have the risk that 475 disappears, and then how do we pay for it?
Yeah,
I see it as if we've got $100,000 left to essentially complete the agency scope of work, if that's true, then let's focus on that, just so we've
Right.
got a complete deliverable,
Mhm.
and then worry about the wastewater separately.
Yeah,
Because the
And-
wastewater, I assume, is going to take a lot more than whatever we've got committed presently or what we have in mind. It's like a longer term big number.
yeah.
I mean,
If we're not going to finish that, no matter what happens, then let's at least finish the agency scope.
The reason
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's important right now, I think, is because as we're starting to negotiate for the real estate opportunity, we want to know as much as we can to
Sure.
put us in the best position.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not important, but
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, that.
an alternative though is like we've got an incomplete agency report and we've got
Oh,
an
yeah,
incomplete,
no, Right.
wastewater treatment plant report, and then we've got nothing.
right.
Not nothing, but just two dangling.
yes, unless we had some assurance that we could, excuse me, have access to that 250,000 because we spent the other money already, and some of that money's been spent on wastewater. It's not ideal, but it's all trusting everyone and trusting. I know that's hard to do, especially because we don't know if it's all going to get pulled. This is where, again, I think we should go back and have a candid conversation with Simon, see what his read is. But I see your point, Lee. We don't want to spend, have a half completed. We're already committed to pay for that whole agency contract anyway, somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, my point is that we don't know what we don't know yet in terms of what activities really, you know, sitting here a year from now, we may be focused on other elements of, you know, either,
Yeah.
you know, data gathering or assessments or trying to estimate what remediation of something that hasn't come up yet. And if we don't have some sort of resources lined up that we can simply deploy in that direction, we're going to be at a disadvantage in that. And I think that our primary advantage all the way through this is by being on top of this stuff early and first, we have the best information about what, you know, what the options are. And that's what I think we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's really smart to look forward. And in the meantime, we'll also try to get access to this 250 that we should have access to.
Right.
Even though we're saying we
Yeah.
don't.
We need to aggressively pursue that. If there's-
Yeah.
Just the fact though that they're playing this game with the insistence that it be spent by June 30th, to me, that's a red flag that they don't want us to spend it.
Oh, yeah. I think we're all sensing that. They're probably super happy to write to you and say, "Ooh, sorry, we can't give it to you, Megan." So
I'm like, we're up for the challenge. We have work to do. We have people on board. We're ready to do it. And
right.
Just one last suggestion, and I don't know if they're already in the middle of it or not, but you know, maybe a call to Adam Backey at DCAM just to let them know what's happening and how this impacts the wastewater treatment study.
Yeah.
At least it just kind of maybe, I don't know what influence he may have. If
It's
any.
a good point.
do you know, Chris, if
another angle.
DCAM has been involved in any of these discussions with ANF? I thought that they might have been looped in, not by us, but I mean, I don't know if they were referenced in any of your correspondence.
No, EOED knows that DCAM's involved, but I don't think they've been talking to each other.
Yeah, I mean, DCAM has their own budget for these things, as I understand it, so they don't have to go that path.
You know, they're driving the bus, and they should at a minimum know what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I still say let's start with Simon. Let's keep it in our head that Adam, he might want to talk to Adam with us. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll find out kind of the next steps after that conversation.
Yeah. So for us, that's our main goal right now.
Yeah,
It sounds like Mark has a good handle on trying to get a number in there. If for next year, John never got back to us about community outreach budget, but I mean, that one I have to say is it's going to be what it's going to be. And if we don't have a huge budget for it, we'll have to work with that.
Community meetings don't cost anything. Like,
right. We can meet at the library.
Maybe we don't send out postcards or whatever, but.
Right. So I'm not super concerned about that. The other part is what I know I'd reached out to you guys about how we should communicate with, you know, John had asked, could we help with the outreach? I'm kind of feeling like it's very, to just put our foot in it again is a little, we kind of need to know what agency's doing. I mean, we could reach out to everyone, but now everyone's getting a zillion letters from all of us. So I don't know if that's a conversation with agency, how they want us involved. But I guess I'm not feeling a super amount of pressure for us to start reaching out to individual departments at the moment.
Agency's supposed to outline kind of where they are at the next meeting, which I know Shannon was polling us for attendance on, and I think that's April 2nd or 3rd. I sat through the land use subcommittee meeting yesterday where they were on that. Got a sense that that's kind of when they are going to say what, you know, how they're doing on the discovery and what information do they need, what sort of help do they want from us. And I think that's a good point in time to get it.
Okay.
There's that.
So after that, maybe we'll zero in more on where they could use some pressure applied, but
Yeah.
it seems to me right now, it's the money.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to sort of segue into this, but I know we did talk about what kind of specific dialogues we might want to have with that list of stakeholders that we,
Yep,
and I did have a chance to sort of go through that, and I have some thoughts
sure, go ahead.
there. It seemed to me that, the secretariats that were listed, housing and livable communities, transportation, and public safety and security, I had kind of three different takes on. It seems to me that the housing and livable secure communities, we probably need to loop in when, and, probably more likely when than if we want to start talking about modifications to the deed restriction on Junction Village. But I also think that that's an element for after we've got some output from the scenario and the community, so I'm thinking that's a summer, fall 2025.
Yep,
DOT, obviously, we have a meeting coming up next week, and we're building that relationship, so that's ongoing already. We want to coordinate around the traffic studies and modeling that they're doing. I feel like that's in place. And
Yep.
I was unclear on, I couldn't put my finger on, well, the specifics of why we want to talk to public safety and security at this stage. Possibly the traffic study.
Is that different than DOC? Are they under, is DOC under them?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. The select board and we have the chairs meeting with the select board quarterly for budgets. So it's seen, and obviously I'm here and talking about it in every liaison report. So I don't know that we need to do anything more than we're already doing for the select board. CHDC, I mean, how are you feeling about that, Lee?
Informing them?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I guess I missed, like, what is the message that we're sending any of these people?
yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about is what message do we really need to work on with any
I mean, other than say we've engaged a consultant and there's a water treatment study, I don't know what else there is to report.
Yeah,
I agree. I think we're like MassDOT and then getting this, the
right.
economic development are our things to focus on right now.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we're gonna, it seems like the group that we probably most want to talk to or engage with is our legislative delegation and start to talk to them about, what gives with this funding? Why is that held up? Invite them to participate fully in the community visioning sessions. So, and I think that we can probably depend on community engagement to do that, but maybe we have an addendum invite for them to make sure that they're invited. And again, once we know what we're asking for around the deed restriction, we might want to discuss that with them. Because
I don't understand.
That's going to turn up in legislation.
I don't understand why community engagement is asking governance to communicate with these other folks. Like, isn't it?
Because we're listed as the liaison in the stakeholder list with the government agencies. And when we originally talked about it, we're like, it doesn't make sense for us if we're doing it, for them to do it, et cetera. And I also get the sense John is just wants some help.
But it's the same. Like, I assume the message should be the same regardless.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. That's
why
why
they want us to deliver that. What's the unified message? Then so be it. But it just
I think it's
duplicative.
I think it's a little bit more of what specific activities are we trying to get these agencies to do to cooperate and collaborate with. So
the other, sorry.
Yeah. So like the DOT system, we really want them to get us into the room on the planning and frankly get moving on the planning.
I agree, and I think you made a good point about when we go before housing and livable communities is when we actually want something. We have a request about Junction Village, so I think a blanket but first we've already sent out a mailer or a letter from us anyway, so I don't think there's much to be done right now. Are either of you guys going to the school presentation?
Yeah, I told Emily that I would help her with that.
Great, thank you. I think that was also part of John's request. It's just they need some help
Yeah.
delivering presentations. Shannon, have they asked for any other help or just on that one?
No, and I don't even know that they necessarily like need help giving the presentation. I just think that if there are to be any questions on other work that subcommittees are doing, they just want someone to be there to be able to speak to that. But I think the school committee meeting is the only upcoming presentation that is scheduled by the community outreach subcommittee. There surely will be more to come from these end.
That's great, and thanks, Mark, for doing that.
Can I just go back to the deed restriction for a second?
Yeah,
So first is, that deed came from DOC and DCAM. So to the extent we want to try to amend that, you know, I think they certainly need to be a party to that discussion. And then secondly, I think that conversation is maybe most productive in the context of a recommendation for housing for the entire site
Right.
rather than its own.
Yeah.
I think, Mark, I think that's what you're kind of saying, right? It's wait until we
Right.
get to that point where we're.
Yeah, I think once we have a community preference about, you know, what sort of the generalized target for housing and what does that housing look like, then we kind of say, okay, well, you know, maybe this is the area of the site that we would like to be considering zoning for housing, and this other area is, you know, going to be used for commercial or whatever, and, you know, look for that trade.
The other thing, I don't know if any of you saw it in the news, but there was a report that some or maybe all of the funding that's attached to like low income housing tax credit type programs, federal subsidies for affordable housing, maybe if it's not already gone in the near future, which could, you know, significantly impact the type of affordable housing project that might go on this site. And granted, you know, maybe it's 3.5 years until anyone's ready to talk about that and things change, but I'm just putting it on your radar.
Yep, and we'll hear what MassDOT has to say about federal funding too, because don't they get the majority of their funding through federal funds?
So, I mean, worst case scenario, this entire project's in a holding pattern.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
To sum up, it's a mess, but where we are in more years. Oh my God.
Other than that,
it's going great. We're being really effective at this stuff. But okay, so I don't think we have much else, unless you guys had other things to discuss. I think we're all on the same page, and we'll give you an update as soon as we get one about this money that they're keeping from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have to give my sympathies to Megan, because I can't imagine like trying to go between all these agencies and what you're up against there. So
it's okay. I'm teeing it up to you all for help. So I appreciate you making some time for this conversation and for your insights.
Yeah.
I'd really like to hear what happens with the conversation with Simon and or the other legislators, you know, and not wait a month.
No,
we
absolutely.
can send something out and just ask, you know, no one respond back. we can BCC after the.
And listen, if they want to have a meeting with our whole subcommittee, then we can try to do that too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll just make the first step and see what they say. Great. Anything else? I'll ask for public comment if there is any. I see one person on.
I mean, I just make the quick comment that obviously if we think it's helpful for the select board to be writing letters, then just let me know and we'll get those letters drafted and written.
For sure.
I suspect Simon would take it and run, but whatever.
Yeah, no, we'll find out what we can do or what we can have select board do. All right, I don't see any public comments, so with that, I'm gonna ask for motion to.
So moved.
We'll figure out let's figure out our next meeting based on how this happens, in case we need to meet sooner. Does that make sense? That we just have Shannon reach back out with dates once we talk to Simon?
Okay.
Okay, great. Sorry, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great.
Second.
Thank you, everyone. We'll talk soon.